Think of a time when you experienced a conversation that left you with a new perspective, or perhaps an inquiry, or you might have felt that something has shifted in you after that conversation. Maybe it helped you gain a new level of clarity, or moved you to take action. That was a coaching conversation. Hello and welcome to the Coaching Conversation Podcast. This is your host, Salah Al-Laythi, and I'm here with Michael McCalla, the president of Lean Agile Intelligence, and really excited about how this conversation will unfold. Michael, welcome.
Thanks, Salah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I want to know more about you. What's your story? How did you get to become the president of Lean Agile Intelligence?
So I consider myself really fortunate to have been introduced to Agile very early in my career, growing up as a BA and being in the product space. I got a Scrum Master certification in 2007, and really at that time realized that this was, helping organizations with their ways of working was something I wanted to make a career out of. So I embarked on a independent consultant career and I did that for 11 years, helping organizations in the Philadelphia area, really Agile, quote unquote, Agile transformations, I'd like to say, transforming the ways of working at every level, whether it be team, program, or portfolio. And in that journey, many of the clients really had a lot of the same issues and really a lack of understanding of what we were trying to achieve with changing the ways of working. And I started to dabble in self-assessments, using Excel, of course, but it was a good way for me to get some data to leadership on how the teams are doing, where I can optimize my time, as well as where there were some systemic impediments that they can help remove. After doing that in 2 or 3 of my engagements and having some success, we decided to embark and create a commercial platform to actually do it. And really at the end of the day, it's about really taking a look at the system of work, providing a mechanism for the people doing the work to provide feedback on where they need leadership's help, provide the people doing the work a way to reflect on their agile and lean practices so they can organically improve. And we're very outcome oriented, meaning that we like to drive the conversations based off of the outcomes that the organization wants to achieve with this adoption or transformation, and really keep the conversation tailored towards what is it we're trying to achieve instead of how agile we want to be. And really the rest was history. We started off 4 years ago. We now have a fairly large client base, and the growth took some time, but after some learnings, we were able to adapt, and it's been a fun ride.
I'm a proponent of metrics and defining, how we're doing, like something that we can improve on. And like you said, it's hard to, when you embark on a system-wide change or some sort of a large change, you need to just get a handle of what's happening, like how things are going.
I think that's fair, and something to drill down on, right? You mentioned system-wide change. And it's so important that organizations realize that if we're doing a quote unquote agile transformation in IT, inherently we are optimizing locally in order to gain the real benefit, the true benefit of any organization trying to survive the digital age. We really have to look at end-to-end flow across the value stream and across all functions and units within the organization. So I think that's really important point, is that we're talking about system-wide change and not doing agile in IT. And I know you've probably seen that a number of times as well as myself.
I think as far as agile coaches or practitioners, we focus a lot on the work and how we do the work, but it's hard to tell where we want to focus our effort to improve how we do the work. So let's step back a little bit and talk about what was the problem that you were facing that inspired you to come up with this idea?
So there was a couple different things. The first one being that the mindset always tended to be that the goal was agile, right? And so how can we change the conversation from not how agile you are or what's your maturity score, more or less, what are the improvements needed within the system of work to allow you to achieve, let's call them transformational outcomes that you're set out for, right? And I think if you asked any CEO, CIO, what they're looking for in any type of transformation, it's improve time to market, obviously delivering value to customers and creating value for the business delivering with high quality, being able to respond to change, and having high quality products. And so how do we drive the conversation you mentioned about improving the ways we work? How do we drive the conversation towards that instead of a score? Because the reality is leaders want to know how they're doing in this journey. And agile maturity is, team maturity, program maturity, individual role maturity. They're all leading indicators that really we shouldn't be ignoring. And so how can we take those maturity and actually drive it towards having the right conversations on what do we need to improve in to help us improve those transformational outcomes, such as time to market and delivering value. So one of the things was, a lot of these organizations and CEOs and whoever you were reporting up to wanted, how are we doing? How are we doing? And I guess the first thing that I should mention here is I'm not necessarily talking about a coach going in and doing assessments of a team. And let's just take that context because that's the typical use case. I'm really talking about a facilitated self-assessment. And self-assessments are the team members are actually assessing themselves against their agile practices. And you get a couple things there. A, we know that people inherently accept change when they have stake in the game and change isn't pushed upon them and there's not an agile coach coming in to do an audit of their team. A self-assessment gives the team, everyone a stake in the game, gives everyone a voice, which is going to allow to uncover team misinterpretations, assumptions, and ultimately drive really rich conversations amongst team members, especially if they're assessing themselves against an assessment that contains stuff that they don't really know. Maybe they don't have access to a coach. So that was really, we're really talking about self-assessment. And I think that's really important to understand because the other piece of that is it becomes a feedback loop to leadership, right? We talk about feedback loops in environments a lot as change agents, but how are you actually getting that feedback? What does those mechanisms look like? Are you doing some type of scaled retros and are the improvements actionable? Yeah. And quite frankly, a self-assessment is once a quarter, the team gets together for 2 hours and talks about improvements. There's not much of an overhead cost on them. And what we've done at LAI is we've made it a very planning poker-esque approach where we provide the assessment, provide 5 stages. Everyone provides their vote in a very planning poker-esque way. We give your highest, your lowest, and your average for the sake of driving conversation. So before we get into the problems, I think it's always important to point out that we're talking about team self-assessments because they're much more powerful than any coach assessment. Do you need a really good facilitator? Absolutely. And any good facilitator has to be able to ask powerful questions and make sure that the team is holding themselves accountable and being honest with themselves.
I think any team, whether it's a development team or even in sports, you got to step back and look at how you're not just how you talk about the work or the game itself, if we use that metaphor, but how we do the work, right? And like how we do practice. How do we practice? Is it the way that we are practicing going to give us the results that we want, or is it actually getting in the way of getting what we want? But I just want to go on a tangent for a second here because you sound like you're saying assessments as if it's a bad word or something. But why do you think assessments get a bad rep? It's something that helps us improve.
It's something that helps us improve. I think it's based upon the intent behind an assessment. Is it an audit of the team to find the bad apples, so to speak? Because in traditional environments, as you know, there wasn't a whole lot of safety there. And that's why I think even folks in our industry tend to think that agile assessments, well, listen, if you have the prerequisites and there is some safety, right? And it is well facilitated and you can aggregate results and start showing data, leading indicators to leadership on how you're doing and where their help is needed. I think there's a lot of power in doing that, as well as teams don't know what they don't know. So you asked some of the problems. One of the problems that I saw was that in a lot of the large scale transformations, there just simply was not enough coaches to go around. So how do we help teams that don't have access to a coach? How do we help the coaches know where to optimize their time? To me, that's 2 good reasons to do some type of assessment to see where we should be optimizing our time, because we're spread very thin. And I haven't seen a transformation where there really is one coach for every, let's just say 4 teams or 2 teams. We hear that thrown around a lot. That's rare in my experience.
I see assessments in many different industries. It's not a new idea for Agile specifically.
Right.
I've worked in leadership coaching where there's the work of the leadership circle where they have a leader leadership assessment or leadership profile we usually give into leaders to find, how they're doing and where they can improve their leadership. I recently saw a clip of an interview between Adam Grant, who's written several books, and he talks about like personality assessments. So things that can help us focus on what's our impact and how do we improve the way that we operate, the way that we work. And for teams, and specifically teams who are trying to deliver outcomes and results, it helps to find where we want to focus our effort. Because like you said, I mean, you don't have someone or a coach can help with many different teams. You could find where are the teams that need the most coaching or need help in the way they work. And something like the Lean Agile Intelligence can provide that insight, quickly, rather than you have to go around and do Excel spreadsheets of assessments and then have to figure out, okay, where do I want to focus my effort?
Because by the time someone builds that out and aggregates all the results, it's could have paid for itself. So it's interesting you bring that up, because the other thing, the first issue we were after was how do we know where to spend our time? The second one that really kind of assisted us was you have to know kind of what future state or what's the North Star you're marching towards, right? What are you trying to optimize for? What are you trying to achieve? There's one thing that we've learned over the past 20 years is that we know it's not one size fits all for any type of agile adoption. Organizations are complex adaptive systems, very unique in their own right. And I've never seen transformational strategy be one and the same for any organization. And so when we were going through and kind of doing this, I guess you can call them pilots with a couple of our clients, what we found was we were constantly customizing the assessment based off of what, the client's context and desired outcomes, helping them optimize for what they're trying to achieve. Now, that could be different across some units. For example, I always bring up, we helped a bank and we were in their payments vertical. Well, quality was obviously very important for them, right? And so we customized an assessment for them to focus on quality. And it seems logical, but you'd be really surprised that people just want an off-the-shelf one-size-fits-all assessment. Well, how can that be if it's not a one-size-fits-all for every team? And so as we constantly customize these things, we actually said, well, if we're going to move forward with the commercial platform, we really should this should be something that we allow change agents to customize, because they know their context better than we do. And why not provide them questions, but the ability to kind of drag and drop those questions into a template, change the language within them to reflect their language, be able to add their own questions. So we've very much settled on kind of, we are this platform for change agents to help them kind of drive the changes based off of their context and outcomes. It very much aligns with my coaching philosophy from an outcome orientation standpoint. And really, I'm hoping the idea there is that we're helping change agents, assess the right things based off of context and outcomes, improve in the right things, right, based off of what they're trying to achieve, and have the right conversations with leadership, who's the ones that can really only change the system, about where are the systemic impediments, how is it impeding what we're trying to achieve, and what experiment can we run to alleviate and remove them. And when you have that conversation of, well, we said we're going to really try to improve time to market, and it looks like 5 teams are having the same issue with, let's just say deployment tools, right? And it's really stopping and testing automation and things like that. Now leadership, maybe they have to invest in training, maybe they have to invest in new tooling, but that's how it drives the conversation, because we said we align to, we really want to get better in time to market. So it changes the conversation towards how agile we are, what's our agile maturity score, to where should we be improving. And that change should be evolutionary and ongoing.
I think it's important to find where we want to focus our attention. And if we don't know where to focus our attention, then like you said, it's going to be like we're going to put our attention or energy in a lot of different places. And that by definition is not really focus. We're distracting and we're not really moving forward. So if this is something that provides insight and it gives us a way to focus our attention, in your experience, what gets in the way of getting this going, trying to help an organization or a system or a team to take a step back and look at how they operate, how they're working, what's important to them, and where they want to focus?
I mean, for me, it's been leaders have to go first in these types of changes. And what I mean by that is they kind of have to adopt a new mindset. They have to kind of lead with the behavioral changes. They are going to have to be the ones that are accountable to remove the impediments in the system. And I'm not sure if everyone gets that. I don't want to take the route of throwing leadership under the bus. We hear that all the time, and that's not fair to them. We have to have empathy for them, right? But I think a lot of times when it does expose these systemic impediments, right, it's really having the tough conversations at that level that people tend to shy away from. And that's, these types of changes, it's real work, right? You have to constantly manage these types of changes. What's our number one impediment? Theory of constraints, right? We need to really focus on that and alleviate it to a point, right? And rinse and repeat. And I just, sometimes it's leadership doesn't always think that that they have to actually be the ones that own and act and be engaged in that conversation. So that's number one. The second piece is really about employee engagement. This is a feedback loop. We are engaging employees to tell us where they need help to improve. And sometimes, and for that to work, there has to be trust, there has to be safety, and there has to be a fundamental belief that they're providing the truth, and really getting their feedback on not only where the impediments are, but also how do we alleviate them and tackle those impediments. We talk a lot about decision making and pushing that down to the information that makes sense. The improvement should be pushed down to that level as well, right?
Yeah.
Because they're the ones doing the work every day. And so trusting, and there's ways that, I've done this is, scaled retros, using the inputs of all the teams. Mm-hmm. And brainstorming and, okay, here's our top 2 impediments that we've gotten, and let's talk about and dot vote and have engagement between leaders and team members, right? People doing the work, and talk about co-creating not a solution, but an experiment to be run to see if it resolves it. And I don't always see the willingness to engage, right? Because they've grown up in organizations where they know best. I shouldn't say that as a blanket statement, but we do see that a lot, right?
Right. I like how you're connecting this idea of engagement to assessment. I remember I even though now I'm doing more consulting or coaching, and I was at a company or an employee, and you get these surveys, and you think to yourself, even if I respond to the survey, what's going to change, and things are going to continue to be the same. So why should I spend my time filling a survey? So this idea it has many different aspects. One is the psychological safety. Am I safe to give my opinion or feedback? And the second is what good is my voice anyway? I mean, nothing is going to change even if I provided the feedback. So those are 2 big impediments.
And obviously we, all votes and notes and things like that are anonymous within LAI. Mm-hmm. But that said, there's still sometimes an unwillingness, to provide that feedback. What the other thing that we do with the engagement piece is we actually do scoring in LAI in the typical transformational outcomes, such as customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, innovation, responsiveness, time to market. And so we do give everyone a score, not a score, but a stage where the team is at from an employee satisfaction standpoint. And that's definitely an input to any type of transformation leadership team to say, here's kind of the pulse, the happiness metric, if you will, from the teams, because it's been, this is knowledge work. I don't have to tell you. The knowledge workers are motivated by autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Psychological safety plays a huge part in that as well. And so if they're not happy, they're probably not innovating. They're probably not, using their brains to the fullest. We're only hurting ourselves as an organization. It's science. Daniel Pink has proved it. And getting people to buy into it, though, is it's a daunting task.
The idea of engagement, it's really interesting, because as a leader, I would really want to know what's the engagement level, and what is that telling me if I see the engagement level is very low. So that could be the starting conversation, a starting point, how to improve the engagement, how to build or create this psychological safety so that people feel empowered and they can share their voice and perspective. So I
totally agree. That is a prerequisite, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you talk about conditions that need to be kind of, and the best way that the successes that I've had is really getting somebody, a leader to kind of buy in and run the experiment, a small experiment, create some social proof that it works. And then you start to get some fertile soil where you can start planting some other plants. But that's really getting somebody to buy in and really do it right. If you do it small, you don't have to fake it, right? And do agile theater with a big bang approach. Well, that's a lot of change, and my risk appetite is not really ready for that. So let's really just put new labels on old behaviors. We know that doesn't get us anywhere. But instead, if we just say, hey, we're going to take these 3 to 5 teams in this quote unquote value stream, and we're going to actually just do this right because it's failed 3 times, the big bang approach, then maybe, right, we'll be able to show some. And you can, and obviously, I would say, well, you should do some assessments so you can see the feedback and you're growing organic improvements. And that's where it starts it's the secret sauce, in my opinion.
I want to go back to this idea about having empathy for our leaders, because they're also having a lot of things to deal with. They don't know where to start. They don't know where to focus. There is a lot coming at them. And so what are some qualities that you've seen for leaders who were able to do these things, like to find where they want to focus the attention? And you mentioned already one of it, like they go first. They have like this idea of, okay, lead by example.
Also have leaders that constantly challenge the status quo. You have those type A's that are always trying to do things better, right? The early adopters. So that's the people that you want to start with, for sure. The other thing is you want to find the folks that are natural leaders. Now, leadership can be learned. It's been proven. However, in the software development world, we've seen a lot of times the smartest developer, because that's the only way they can get promoted, right? Is go up to a manager level, and now you've taken your probably the best developer, and now he's kind of managing work. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but that's how he gets promoted and gets paid more. So why wouldn't he do that? So I think you see a lot of leaders in that space that have kind of come up through those ranks that really need upskilling, if you will, in leadership, kind of gaining an understanding of, and they understand software development. It's funny, right? Because we talk about knowledge work and it's unique and you need to empower the people closest to it. And those folks, they did it, right? That they did that work. They were there. But when they get promoted to that manager level, they start kind of this command and control. And, maybe over the first 6 months, that code base looks the same, but the further you get out, the architecture completely changes if it's emergent, right? And so now you may be telling people something to do that maybe was the right thing to do, 2 years ago, but not anymore. And you have to develop this trust. I think there's an opportunity to reiterate that mindset with some of these folks. And so I think there's an opportunity there, given that they lived it and breathed it, with a little reiteration, some coaching and some guidance that you can get them there. The other thing is you don't know what's driving their behaviors. And so potentially they're being asked from their leadership hard questions that, or they're being held accountable to things they can't control. And the only thing they can do is kind of manage that in a command and control process. So to me, that's where kind of this vicious cycle starts to kind of get out of control. And that's why you have to have empathy, because when you start to peel it back, you find out what's driving their behaviors. And so it's not fair to them. We always say, the frozen middle, right? Oh, the frozen middle. We can't get through the frozen middle. Well, the reality is what's driving their behaviors. And let's start looking at that and peeling that back. And plus, we say it over and over about coaching beyond the team, but I don't see it happening enough, where really we should be coaching them. And in order to be successful in doing that, you have to it's really helpful to have lived their role, right? Were you a dev manager? And if not, you should get a coach that was a dev manager that understands the things they're dealing with, and not a program manager who's now an agile coach, and that's not always going to work. So there's an art to this transformation stuff, right? How do we orchestrate it in a really, really meaningful way? And it's fun work, but very, very, very hard.
Yeah, I love that question. Like, what's driving the behavior? What's driving their behavior, and what's driving any behavior? Like, this is something that we started with this conversation, like system change or system wide change, and you might be able to change your own behavior, but then you're living in the system. You're living in an organization where there are still a lot of influence on you as a manager, as a team member. And that could, like you said, like you could be with your team, you could have like a lot of flexibility than when you start to get promoted to become a manager or a leader. And now you have a lot of other influence or responsibilities that could conflict with how you were operating before. And then you get into the command and control mindset that just to unintentionally or just to by the how you're influenced by the organization. And then I like what you're saying, it's an art, but you're combining this idea of like the science or data and art, because you have the insights from the data that you're getting from the assessment, but then the approach could be different depending on where they are and where they want to go.
Yeah, in context and industry and all that type of stuff. Where I see it really successful is where you have at a fairly high level, let's just say VP level, a cross-functional leadership team that's a quote-unquote transformational team, one vision, know what success looks like. We're measuring it. We're holding ourselves accountable. There's a sense of urgency. And then self-assessments is a feedback loop into that team. So you have an Agile Center, a coach's Agile Center of Excellence that's obviously using that data to know where they optimize their time. But those patterns and impediments are coming up and going into that team. They're being leaders. They're enabling, they make sure that their people have the right skills, and they're removing impediments. And so I call it managing the change is real work. And that's an input that'll help inform, how do you see the system? It's really difficult to do. Well, one way to really kind of put your pulse on it is through this idea of self-assessment, because it is a feedback loop. And if you normalize the data and you aggregate it in certain ways, it becomes really powerful. And so, yes, that is the insights that'll feed into that transformational team, because it's those folks are really accountable for the change and can change the system with the help of coaches and giving them ideas. And I'm a big fan of options. Okay, we have this constraint. How do we go about solving it? Well, here's a couple different experiments we can run. That's the art of orchestrating it, getting alignment, making people feel safe. It's not going to be a big bang change. We're just going to run these experiments, because you can't force the pace of change. It's only going to go as the system allows it. So if you can get this kind of continuous improvement mindset, an agile transformation doesn't start in 2021 and end in 2022, and it's just ongoing, and people at those higher levels are accountable for change, and you can use data to drive those insights and identify those improvements. I think the sky's the limit. You need the commitment from the organization. They need to be willing to be coached and understand this kind of new mindset and why. But I think if you combine the two, it could be powerful.
You're reminding me of what Daniel Mezek refers to as this idea of invitation. So you gotta invite engagement.
Invite over inflict.
And then you could work with the willing, right? So if you combine those two concepts, to invite people for engagement and then work with the willing, that could be, just those two simple ideas could build a lot of momentum, because it's much harder to work with the people who may not be ready, or they don't want to respond, or they're not willing to try something different. In your experience, I'm sure there was some insights that you could see across different organizations. Like, is there one insight or two insights that you could share about when you facilitate these engagements or assessments? What's the top insight, or maybe something that is common across the board that you see?
Yeah, I mean, all the teams are different, so I don't know if I can go there. But from an enterprise assessment standpoint, because we have them, it's really realizing a lot of organizations really just don't realize that this is more of a change management exercise than, so a big piece of our enterprise agility includes kind of that engagement, communication, cross-functional team, ownership, one mission, one vision. It all comes back to the same thing about really understanding what we're after here. I think we've made strides in the industry, and you go on LinkedIn, and a lot of times it could be depressing, right? Because it says the agile movement has failed, and we kind of dropped the ball. I don't know if that's really the case. I do think that it was seen as a delivery mechanism because that's what Scrum is. That, that's what it is. Most framework. But now we have the movement towards this concept of business agility is a good thing. It's kind of a rebranding of Agile, if you ask me, but that's okay. If it gets people engaged and understanding that it's a system-wide movement and a system-wide change, then let's do it. I just think really, truly understanding the difficulty in changing the system and it being this kind of ongoing, right people engaged, very small batch oriented, managing change in an agile fashion. I mean, agile was created for complex tasks, right? Software development is complex, right? Organizational change is no different. We need to use the same approach. What's nice is I'm not the only one saying this, right? You mentioned Dan. I feel like a lot of the thought leaders are all talking about the same stuff, about engagement, about getting the customer involved, collaboration, that principle stuff. We're all saying that type of stuff. It's just the practices tend to be different in given context, and that's the way it should be. And so, I think there's a lot of people out there that see that this is much more than, and even as an Agile coach, I just spoke to someone else about what are the qualities of a change agent. Right. And it was like they were asking, okay, your knowledge of, agile systems thinking, design thinking, Kanban, lean, those sort of things. But where we landed was really being able, another quality, if you were going to say top 3, was really being able to orchestrate that change, know who the influences are, and be able to be a connector. So it's all part of that change management stuff. You forget agile. Right. To be successful, you got to be able to navigate an organization. You got to be able to connect people and realize it's going to take some time.
One of the episodes, I had a conversation with Jason Little. He wrote the Lean Change Management book, and he said Agile is just a trigger for change. It's not necessarily about Agile. It's about how do we work better as a team and, as an organization. And if there's a way to help us find where we need to focus our attention, at least to start with, then, why not? Why not find the data or the insights? Like you said, I mean, a lot of these things we know intuitively, and I'm sure leaders also know intuitively, but I think data can give them more of a sense of urgency that this is actually happening, like it's backed by...
And it's real,
right?
That's when rubber hits the road, when it's like, all right, well, the teams are doing Scrum, but really your environments aren't in sync. You're not integrating. Your contracts with your vendors are fixed. You're bringing in contractors in and out, and the teams can't control that stuff. And the data is telling you that's what's slowing them down. And you said your goal is to get better at these transformational outcomes, time to market, responsiveness. What do you want to optimize for? And if you can just kind of start the conversations there, and you have that kind of cross-functional transformation team with leaders that can change the system and work together, and they have a common mission, you can start driving some positive change with an experimental mindset, so they don't get concerned. And just start small and use the metrics to kind of arm the conversation.
It sounds simple. And
Right.
And I know it's not it's not that simple, but it starts with leaders who really wants to engage people and find where to focus the attention, because without that, it's going to be like the flavor of the day. Every day is something different, something new, and there's a lot of distraction on many things. And if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority, right? Everything is important, nothing is important. Yep. And then we don't make a whole lot of progress. I think that's probably one of the reasons. I don't know if there's data to this, but there's one of the most problematic with change and system changes. Like there's constantly shifting direction and not focusing on what is it that is important to us. Like you said, what are you trying to optimize? What's the outcome of this? So yeah, these are good insights. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up? Any final thoughts or comments?
I think, if we were to summarize this conversation, we're kind of starting to see this business agility movement, which gives us another kind of trigger and an opportunity, along with the pandemic, to kind of say and create that sense of urgency for this is a system-wide change, and all units are in scope. Right, when you're changing it, right? And I really like the new ways of working term. I just think that incorporates all of the bodies of knowledge out there, such as Agile, Lean, Design, because we're all using all of them. It's not really just agile. And then if you can manage that change and we're aligned to what we're trying to achieve, and you have a mechanism in place that allows you to gain those insights, it will help inherently drive the change or accelerate it. It will still be a very lengthy journey. We all know that. And there's probably no end. But if you can continuously help improve the system of work and help people adopt new ways of working, and you're in and you have stake in the game as a leader, well, that alignment's going to help you change the complex system that is the organization. And I think a lot of organizations have actually failed a lot. We've all seen the metrics on, transformations fail 90% of the time. Yeah. Okay, define failure, things like that. But if they really understand going in, system-wide change, leadership's got to be accountable and engaged. We have to engage the employees and start trusting them that their feedback is going to be action upon. There's some conditions, and some principles up front that you can just kind of go, are we all aligned to this?
Yeah.
Because it's going to drive our conversations going forward. And you can use data to drive the change. You have a better chance, and not talk about how agile we are, but talk about what is it we're out to achieve. And then what are the practices and the principles that are going, or the principles and practices, I should say, principles first, are going to allow us to achieve it.
Again, starting with why we're doing this. These are good principles to keep in mind as you embark on system-wide change. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to take a lot of time. And a lot of focus and engagement and inviting to the people who are part of it. And most likely you'll be more successful than, put a change out there and hopefully it will stick there. That's it. And that doesn't work.
Not very sticky, right? That's where that engagement piece comes in, right? If you invite the people and they show social proof that it's working, they become the cool kids. And everyone wants to hang with the cool kids. To find me, our website is www.leanagileintelligence.com. You can go in there and there is a free 3-week free trial. You give it a spin. It's got full functionality, that free trial, and you can see if it could help you achieve your goals as a change agent. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I don't shy away from posting my opinion and sharing some of these insights with Agilists there. And I like to get back onto the conference scene, but I've taken a little bit of a break over the past 2 years, but that's something in the near future. So looking forward to getting back out there, especially with a light at the end of the tunnel of the pandemic. So knock on wood.
We're hopeful. So thank you, Michael. I appreciate your insights and time, and really glad we were able to connect and make this happen. So thank you.
I appreciate you having me. It was a great conversation, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, thank you for listening. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about or take action on. Remember, take action and get clarity. Then repeat.